The injury update is no James Young, no Marcus Smart, no Vitor, obviously no Marcus Thornton. So we got 11, and we'll go from there. The other night. Who?
Smart, how he's feeling?
We didn't do a whole lot because we went pretty hard yesterday. He did some spot shooting and those types of things, but you know, they said they're going to try it again tomorrow.
You touched on this a little bit yesterday, with Jabari Parker going out. You've got an awful lot of guys high into their average. You talked about experience and how that affects how rookie approaches things.
Five of the top 7.
Yeah, so I mean, Embiid was hurt before he got in, so he hasn't played a game. So that one doesn't really count as far as being injured in the NBA. And then I still think it's more unique circumstances and random than it is age. But you know, there might be a medical study that proves me wrong. So I don't know. But I know that there's a lot of young guys for a lot of years that have played without injury. And you know, I feel bad for Parker because that's a hard injury to recover from. But you know, he'll be diligent in his rehab, and I'm sure he'll be back as soon as possible.
Are you sticking with the same starting lineup tonight?
Yes.
Have you had second thoughts about, since Sully's going through these struggles, if Kelly would, you know, fit better in that starting lineup next to Zeller?
So I think that you always have, you think about that after every game, win or lose. And I think that, you know, Kelly's in a really good place after the last game. But maybe more important than that is the second unit's in a really good place. And so I think that we'll continue to try to figure out a way to get everybody going and started and all that. But you know, our first unit has played a lot of good quarters and a lot of good times together and good minutes together, especially in that little 3-game run that we had. So I'm not going to overanalyze it right now, but we certainly think about it. And if something's not going right, we'll get Kelly in quickly.
Is this stretch a good example of, you know, coming into the season? You said you wanted a shorter rotation. You talked to some guys about how you may not have a role at the beginning, but to stay ready and be ready.
Yeah, so a couple of the guys I talked to about staying ready and be ready aren't available. Yeah, it's the way it goes. I mean, you know, we've got 11 guys, and 11 guys have to be ready to play and all play well. So, you know, I think it's every team's going to go through this at certain times. We haven't, you know, gone through it as far as a lot of numbers that much yet. We've certainly missed Marcus the better part of this first 20 some odd games, but you know, we've been pretty fortunate injury-wise thus far.
Coach, when you guys are playing at your best, what do you ask of your team? What do you want to see from them tonight?
Well, I think we're defensively into the ball at a pretty good rate, and then offensively we're moving the ball. You know, I think those are pretty good visuals of whether we're playing well or not.
The Magic have a couple players in Tobias Harris and Vukovic who are playing well, putting up good numbers, but the team has a losing record. When the time comes, how do you look at guys like that when you're making your all-star votes?
Yeah, so the thing that I would say about them, and I would add Oladipo to that, I would say that, you know, those guys will all be on the board in the discussion, right? And then you just figure out at that time of the year who's playing best, who you think's impacting people the most. But you also have to realize there's a lot of players that are up for that, and when you start writing names on the board, it becomes harder and harder to actually choose who you're not only going to put on but leave off. But they're all in consideration, and it's a credit to them. I think you know, Oladipo, Tobias Harris are guys that have not only made plays throughout most of games, they've made plays when it's mattered most. I mean, Tobias Harris hit 2-game winners already this season, and then Vucevic has been a guy that you hear from multiple coaches around the league about, you know, how advanced he is, and that he may very well be an all-star center in the East at some point soon.
Could Jeff be an example for you guys of somebody that you hope other coaches maybe think about a little bit?
Yeah, I certainly think so. But I do think this. I do think you have to be on the winning side of the column more often than not to have your best chance. Doesn't mean you have to be like, you know, doesn't mean there's like a magic formula, but your team has to be playing well, and I think that that's a big part of anything. And you know, sometimes on the great teams, guys that maybe should make it get snubbed because they're on great teams, they kind of get overshadowed, right? And then sometimes you know, you see teams that maybe you didn't think would be quite as good but have really played or performed well, and you pull out the one or two guys that you think have contributed most to that, and they do make it. So it's December 17th, so I think we're still 2 months away from that. So, but there's certainly, you know, those guys that you mentioned all have had great years.
You
Brad, you mentioned Oladipo. You've obviously seen him up close for a few years. What are your thoughts on his development now in his second season?
So I thought not only that, I saw him play in both summer leagues right up close, and you know, the thing, his reputation coming out, and I didn't know him personally, I obviously competed against him, but his reputation coming out was that of an extremely hard worker. And you know, everybody talks about hard work, but there are certain guys that take it to a different level, and he's one of those guys that has that reputation of taking it to a different level, and you can see it in the game. You can see it with his ball handling. He's good going both directions. He's shooting it. You know, he's 19 for 40 from 3 this year. Not a huge volume, but you know, almost 50% from 3. And he makes big shots. He makes tough shots. He's never been scared. It's been a big part of who he is. And I've always been a fan of his. I think he's a good player.